Now, I know that we're designing flat static designs in a flat static design tool, but that doesn't mean that our designs have to be flat and static. We can't forget that on the phone, on the website, things are flying around, they're scrolling, swiping, hovering, clicking, enlarging, reducing in size, overlay. All these different interactive elements are a big part of the layout, whether it's the small little details of the layout or big full page transitions, things like that. So how do we incorporate this interactivity into our static design tools? And how can we plan for that? How can we produce tests? Let's dive into some of these ideas behind creating these rich interactive layouts that will take our designs to the next level. Let's take a look at some examples. All right, so first of all, this is such a simple example. I've got an unordered list here in a CodePen, and I just numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4, and I added a little bit of a scale on hover and a little bit of a background change. And you know, something simple like this just gets like a nice interactive feel to it. And all I'm doing is I'm increasing the scale by 1.05, and then I'm increasing the opacity from 0.8 to 100%. And you can see if I take out the opacity and the transition, and we just have these simple black hover overstates, I mean, it still feels interactive, but it's not nearly as fun and exciting. And especially if I took away the hover state altogether, you know, technically the mouse hand is giving me the affordance that I can actually click on these things. But just a few simple lines of code of CSS can add a lot of fun interactivity to these little tiny pills. And this is easy to design inside of Figma or Sketch or anything else, you know, making something a little bit bigger, changing the background color. But sometimes it can be difficult, especially with these small micro interactions. It can be hard to get a feel for how it actually works without playing with it and like mousing over it. So a lot of times you might need to make a small animated prototype or put something inside a CodePen so you can get a look to see how it feels. An example of when I use something almost exactly the same way with the scale is these logos right here. You know, it's very subtle, but I wanted to put just a little bit of interactivity on these logos. As you rolled over, it just adds a little bit more playfulness and a little more fun. Same thing with these. If you zoom way in, you can see I'm rotating them slightly and hover and increasing the scale, and doing the same thing with the buy button. I'm raising it up a little bit, and then if you go down here, you can see these are raising. Just adding and just being thoughtful about adding a little bit of interactivity. It's kind of similar to the same way that if I'm talking to you and you're looking at your phone, and you're like, yeah, You're not being very interactive with me. But if I call your name or if I say, hey, what's going on? And you're like, yeah, you're responding to my interaction with you. And if you think about the human to human interaction, anytime you can get a response or an interesting conversation and you say something, someone repeats it back, or, you know, something is engaging, it's usually because there's a response and some kind of interaction. So if we can think about our layouts in the same way as having like a human conversation, you know, it doesn't need to be crazy and animated and oh my gosh, can you believe it? I think I just changed something. No, I think you're still good. Okay. So it doesn't need to be crazy. And sometimes there's a time to go over the top. Something I just actually might have just messed up on the camera. No, okay, we're good. So it's not like you have to go crazy over the top with animations, and I've done that before too, and I've had to scale it back. But it's just one of those things where you're kind of mindful of what is going to allow a user to know that they are interacting with the app. It's the same exact way if you look at the Twitter app, and this, you know, if I'm refreshing the screen and I'm pulling to refresh and it's kind of slowly coming down and then popping back up, if I'm hitting the tweet button and the modal is popping up from the bottom and it's sliding in, and it slides up and the keyboard comes up. Like, that's not a mistake. All of these are kind of playing together to add to the richness of the experience. So let's look here at apple.com/privacy. So as I scroll down, you can see that, you know, this layout is changing. Once I scroll past the global header, you can see that now the layout, there's a fixed header here because they want you to be able to go in between these different they want you to be able to go in between these different navigation areas. And then right here, you know, it's got a video here, and if I click more, this video area kind of fades out and reveals the extra information. And you could, you know, there's 100 different ways you could create this layout, and you could have a video and the title and then all of the body of text, but it might be a little bit overwhelming and maybe someone doesn't want to read all that. So they're adding this simple little hover animation, and they're ever so slightly twisting this thing into the X, and the more isn't just fading out, it's also sliding over. So just tiny little details to add interactivity. And I feel like they could have even added, when you click more, instead of the text just fading in, it could also slide slightly from left to right to mimic that more icon. So it just adds a little bit more, it just adds a little bit more life to it. Let's look at another example on Nike.com. So you can see here we've got a simple grid layout, standard e-commerce with our filters on the left. Again, you can see that this little section right here, they're scaling this down and they're making it a sticky element on the top. Same thing with filter and sort by. So adding these like fixed headers while you scroll, it's definitely one way to add some interactivity. But then if you look at these, like hover any of these images and you get these extra little items here, and I'm just hovering, you know, a lot of this isn't necessarily possible on mobile, but it is worth enhancing the experience, especially if I'm wondering, I wonder if this jacket comes in black or brown. You know, there's a lot of fun little ways you can add subtle interactive qualities to individual elements. And it's not really making it interactive for interactive sake, because that's an easy road to go down as well. If you get all into animation and you make things flying around for no good reason, believe me, I've done that in the past. And if it's not very intentional, then it's not really going to add much. It's not really going to add much value to the product. So this simple little animation, or interactivity rather, you know, it's allowing me to see the covers or the colors of this particular product without having to click into it, load a new page, and wait for that to happen. But now I can still see these larger. It's just going to take a little bit longer because it loads those images in. And then what I think is another neat interactive layout here, you know, they're adding in this video that shows a lot of what you can't get in a photo. So just keeping in mind that videos can get put into the web. You know, it doesn't have to be only photos. And if I click one of these, 9 times out of 10, anytime you're shopping for clothes or shoes or whatever, you want to see a really big image. And I don't know about you, but I can't stand you click it and then there's like a magnifying glass and it's like weird and it's kind of clunky. So I love to see this be like a full takeover. So I click this and all of a sudden, boom, I've got a gigantic image. Simple little X button here. And all of these images I can see really, really large. And I'm getting exactly what I want. I don't have to worry about any other interface elements crowding out the images, because all I really care about right now is seeing how this jacket looks, seeing the details, you know, and having this layout change as I click on it. It's just a really great way. And so as we're designing these grids and these detail views, we need to start thinking about the transitions and the intention behind why, you know, are we going to go really big? Because does that make sense? You know, not every site needs to have a big overlay that shows a bunch of details. So knowing when you're going to do it and why you're going to do it is first and foremost the most important thing to do. But then you also just want to play around with, how are we going to make this happen? Is it going to grow in from the top? Is it going to fade in, or is it just going to come over in a huge fashion? A lot of times if you try to go too over the top with animations, it's going to make the browser feel clunky. So you have to kind of balance all that and talk to the developers or whoever's going to be implementing this and collaborate on those ideas versus just saying, here's what I designed, here you go. And we'll cover a lot more of animation and prototyping in some other lessons. But for now, I just want to kind of hammer in the point that our layouts are going to be interactive. The more interactive, the better, as long as that is creating the correct intention for, what you're intending the thing to actually do. So I'm going to pull up just a few other personal project examples and kind of walk you through some of these interactive pieces here. So this is a video that I exported. I think I created this in Vision Studio. This would also be possible in Figma or XD. So right here, this is like you landed on this app's home screen for the first time, and I wanted a way to let people know they could call or text to get started. So I've got this simple thing I'm animating a little arrow down and over to let people know you can call or text. And these are the two different places that you can do it. And I'm also bringing in like the brighter white. So it's something this was relatively simple to implement, but this simple interactivity is going to create a lot more usability for like the landing screen. Instead of just leaving someone in a blank place, this would give someone a lot more of an indication of what they can do next, especially if you're also prompting them with, hey, why don't you call a text or friend to get started with your new number? Next, in the same app, I was designing a custom dialer, and your standard dialer has A, B, C, D, E, F underneath each number. And it's very rare that I use that. And when I do, it's like maybe 1% of the time when I'm actually using my phone. So I thought, what if we're dealing with an interactive screen here. So what if I put ABC in the top right as a little toggle to show and hide those letters whenever you needed it? That way it could just be a lot more clean and we wouldn't have to worry about it. Some people might say, why would we need to hide it? It doesn't matter. Well, if you're, when you're designing something like this, you're going to have to sell the value if you think it should exist. You can't just say, here it is, I want you to implement this, and this is what we should do. But it's only going to take you a few minutes to design something like this. And so if you can design it and show what it looks like and let people interact with it, you're going to have a much better chance of convincing someone, whether it's a stakeholder or a developer, that they should implement this. Because if you do it well, this serves as your persuasive piece to say, look, we could do this, and these numbers raise up, and here's what the hover states look like. A lot of times you really just have to add some interactivity to make these screens come alive, because otherwise this is a pretty simple, kind of a bland screen. But once you have the simple layout and you add the interactivity layer on top of it, it kind of comes alive. This is another example from this project called Siempo. Now you can see I'm going to slowly scrub through this. I made this in Adobe Animate, which used to be Adobe Flash. And this is this took a long time to do, probably a full couple of days to animate all this, or at least a day after all the designs were complete. But you can see I'm tapping this big area at the top, and then the text, call, and contacts are kind of slinking up. So I wanted it to feel kind of elastic in a way, just to give it a little bit more, a little bit more fun, I guess, because things can just slide straight up, or if it has this kind of slinky effect, it just feels like it's like, maybe more reactive. And then same thing, as I'm typing JES, the auto populate is bringing up the same things in the same kind of format. I chose the top option, and then the mobile and home number is kind of fading in. So I'm reusing that same animation. And then I tap call, or actually, no, I'm choosing the contact from that person. Same animation. I want a text. So now all of a sudden text pops in. And then as I type, then the ability to send comes in, showing what happens when the message is loading and sending, slides over, so on and so forth. So you get this, what might seem like a very simple, maybe not as wow of a design, can really come to life when you start thinking about all of the little interactive details that can happen. And if you'll notice, most of the interactivity only comes from changing 3 to 4 different values, changing the X coordinate or the Y coordinate of any given piece of UI, or changing the opacity or the scale of an object. Those 4 things changed at just the right time, whether it's hiding and showing things or sliding things in on an X coordinate from 0 to 120 or 0 to 120 on the Y axis. Those 4 things can take you so far as long as you're trying to like fine tune those details and add those interactive qualities. And you might want to, there's plenty of times when all you need is the simple screen to screen slide or any standard animation that comes with any device like in iOS that you're drilling down and screens are sliding, or you're tapping a button and a modal slides up from the bottom. But every now and then you need to kind of think about those rich interactive pieces when something can just add a little bit more in context for what you're designing. Here's another example of this My Monero wallet, and I was trying to show the developer how this little address thing would work because I didn't want all of these crazy long keys to be showing by default. So I actually just copied and pasted some of these static designs from Sketch into Adobe XD because Sketch, at least at the time that I made this, didn't have any animation properties, and I don't believe it does now actually. But if I check this, I'm just using a simple little dissolve animation between the two, but it gives you an idea that, okay, this content's going to get pushed down and this little arrow is going to, kind of rotate. So sometimes just a simple, like rough prototype like this can give someone else who's going to implement it just enough information where they're like, oh, okay, now I can understand. They know what they're going to do with the code based on what you've shown them with the design. And sometimes you have to experiment. Sometimes you have to ask questions. Is this possible? Could we do this? Could we do this before you start working on your ideas? Because I think one of the worst things you could do is not have an idea of the constraints that you're dealing with and then just design something crazy and try to hand it off to someone. You're going to have to collaborate with whoever is going to implement this to get your ideas to fruition. And unless you have a solid working knowledge of how this is going to work already, then you're definitely going to need to collaborate with other people on things like this. Otherwise, it's just going to fall kind of flat. All right, another quick example here. So I had this is like an app for lawyers who are dealing with personal injury cases. And I had these it was basically kind of like a chat app kind of thing that lets someone kind of go back and forth with the lawyer and their assistants. And I was struggling to kind of show how all of this was going to work. And it just felt like long and, when you're dealing with a bunch of messages over and over and over and you're scrolling forever inside of a document like this, it feels a little bit overwhelming. So I decided to put this into a coded prototype. I just coded this up with HTML and CSS. And I'm not telling you that you have to code and that you have to put together prototypes. I'm just showing this particular example because even if you uploaded this into an InVision prototype or a Sketch prototype or a Figma prototype and you showed the scrolling, it's just going to add that level of interactivity that will tell the story of your designs that much better. So in this one, I wanted to show like what each action meant, and I wanted to show like as you're reading this and you're going through this, it was an easy way to kind of present each one of these items and what was going to happen, and just having this being interactive like this, as simple as a scroll, it just made a lot better of a handoff piece when I was, giving everything to the developers. And it's going to be different every time. There's going to be a different way to hand things off or to prototype things or to have conversations every single time. When you're handing something off, it's always going to be different. And again, I'll talk about handoff in another lesson because that's a whole, big topic on its own. But I just want to, again, drill in interactivity in your layouts. We have the ability to be interactive and we need to embrace it because that's what's going to make it really come to life. Okay, so for homework, 2 external resources that I want you to check out. One is going to be this transitional interfaces post by Pascal De Silva, who does a really good job explaining some of these ideas behind interactivity with, things just showing up versus things animating in. So it's a really good little brief article on kind of animating some things. He's also uploaded a talk that he did. And then lastly, Tom Giannatasio from InVision Studio did a really great talk. This is just under 20 minutes, and he talks all about animation and ways to add animation into your prototypes and just to add a lot of rich interactivity. So I highly encourage you to check that out. And also, this is definitely not a requirement, but if you want to get more into animation and get some of these ideas behind what's happening, you can also check out switchtostudio.com, which is a course that I created in collaboration with InVision. So if you ever want to dip your toes into the custom animation inside of InVision Studio, this is a great resource to do it. Again, I will cover animation in this particular course and another lesson, but I just wanted to give you a couple of things to look at if you're really interested in kind of going down the rabbit hole on that. Okay, so for homework, really quickly, I want to cover some of this animation stuff inside of Figma. Because for homework, I'm going to get you to create an interactive layout with a simple to-do list or something similar. You can come up with another idea if you want. But just have a list. You can see I've got my list here. Here's all my stuff. I need to make coffee, work out, email that person back, get some groceries, and make dinner. So if I click on this get some groceries, you can see I've got a little thing sliding down and it reveals milk, eggs, coffee, and lots of bacon. And I click it in and it closes. And in fact, I can click anywhere on this whole screen because I added the tap interaction to the entire screen. And I just want to show you how I created this really quickly because this will give you an idea for how you can add some interactivity to your homework for this particular lesson. Because what I want you to do is create something similar to this. You can either take this and redesign it, or you can take this and create an overlay, some kind of interactive layout that I want you to put together. And it can just be one screen to another screen just to kind of get that ball rolling. So if you look, when you're creating these interactivity pieces like this, a lot of times it's helpful to start with the final, to have basically 2 screens, one to start with and one that you end on. And the way you want to do this is, let me move this up. Actually, let me just duplicate this so I don't mess anything up. Bring this down. So you can see what I've done here is I've got get some groceries. Basically group 1 through 5 indicates all these different ones. I didn't really bother naming them yet. So inside of group 4, get some groceries, and then the rectangle is the background. And then right here, you can see I've got a notes layer. And I've got just a simple text layer with milk, eggs, everything like that. But what I've done is I've created a mask beneath this line of text. And to create a mask, all you do is draw a rectangle on top of your text, put those things in a group, and then you can choose that rectangle and hit Control-Command-M to create a mask. And then you can move the mask around, and you can see it's going to mask the text. So that's what I've done here is created a mask, and you can see if I move this mask around, it's going to mask the text. And so then if I delete this out of here, so what I did was I option dragged this over here, and then I changed the background back to this color. And then all of these are set at 60 pixels high, so I'm going to change that. Actually, let me do that last. So what I'm going to do is simply grab this rectangle and make it smaller. So I'm changing the size of the mask. And it doesn't matter how you do it or how small you make it. You just kind of want it to be down here, because if it's animating from this screen to the next, it's going to grow like that. So if I did it the opposite way, it would grow from the top. So we wanted to grow from the bottom. We wanted to grow from the top, and we want this to be 60, and then we want that to be right there in place, and everything else is the same. So now I have those elements hidden inside of here. And so now I can click here, go to prototype, drag this over here, and say on tap, I want to navigate to list expanded. That's already done. And I want to make sure Smart Animate is selected here. And then I want to do the same thing for this screen. Drag the point over there, navigate to list, Smart Animate is selected. And then if I go to the prototype, you can see that that's happening. So I want you to take this example and create your own kind of list and detail view. If you want to do an expanded version, or if you want to pop it out and make it grow, change the colors, change it however you want to. I just kind of want to get you into the mindset of thinking through interactivity. So let's don't waste any more time, and let's get started on that interactive layout.